Joining me now is Christine Hallquist. She is the Just Democrat candidate for governor in Vermont. Christine, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, I'm happy to be here.
So why does Vermont have a Republican governor? That seems incredibly weird to me.
Well, you know, when he ran, I think Vermonters were kind of like, okay, this is going to be a safe bet. He doesn't follow the national GOP. But what we discovered is that he actually does follow the same tactics of the National Republican Party. You know, he said he was about affordability, but then he vetoed a bill that would have raised the minimum wage. He vetoed a bill that would have protected our children from toxic toys. He vetoed a bill that would have given family leave, and he vetoed a bill that would have made polluters pay. He also has gone after our public education system. He's going after that as well. So I think we've all discovered that this is not a harmless Republican here.
Yeah, you know, Just Democrats sent out a tweet earlier today that I retweeted. It was about a separate issue, but it applies perfectly here. There are no moderate Republicans. There are no moderate Republicans. There are no moderate Republicans. And so
I agree with that. Yep.
Yeah, in the Northeast, Democrats that control those states, and by the control I mean the voters, they keep electing Republican governors because they're so fair. Oh, let's give the Republicans a shot. Are they fair to you in Mississippi? Are they fair to you in all the different red states, Idaho, Wyoming? No. And so there's a perfectly good progressive here who doesn't take corporate PAC money. This should be an absolute no-brainer. But it turns out, Phil Scott, your opponent, is having some trouble in the polls recently. How much trouble, and why do you think it is?
Well, I should tell you that, you know, he ran two of his own internal polls and then didn't release the results. And now in the last month, the Republican Governors Association has pumped $300,000 in the state. And some of that money, $70,000 of that's coming from the Koch brothers. And also there's money coming from a couple in Massachusetts who's been supporting this referendum to remove transgender rights. So, you know, it's clear he knows he's in trouble. It's clear the Republican Party knows he's in trouble. That's why so much money is coming into this state.
So all right, let me ask about the media, because I feel like if the people of Vermont knew that you take no corporate PAC money and you're uncorrupted, and your opponent is taking money from the Koch brothers, how in the world could the state that elected Bernie Sanders overwhelmingly over and over again vote for a Koch brother funded Republican governor? That's insane. So does the press not cover it enough? What's the situation there, Christine, on that front?
Well, I think it's, you know, he's a nice guy. He's clearly a nice guy. You know, I call it the wolf in sheep's clothing. But, you know, so I'm not sure people are necessarily seeing through it yet. But I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to get elected, and it's going to be the first time since 1962 we've rejected an incumbent governor. I've actually had lots of Republicans calling me to say they're voting for me, and they do it for two reasons. One is because I have a plan to grow the economy, our rural economy, but also they've been complaining about the negative campaigning that the RGA has been doing in our state. They kind of long for the old days when Republicans were nicer, what we call our Jim Jeffords Republican days.
Yeah, look, when I was growing up, there used to be an ad called that would say, "This isn't your father's Oldsmobile," right? This isn't your father's Republican Party. I remember Jim Jeffords. I'm old enough to remember him, and he was a perfectly pleasant guy, and he was in fact a moderate back when moderate Republicans existed, right? There are no Koch brother funded moderates. It's not a thing, and so that's why when he had an opportunity to, he made sure to block increased wages in Vermont. Crazy,
yep.
Crazy
and
to vote for a Republican.
And he also said in a debate a couple weeks ago, he actually said, if this is Phil Scott speaking, he turned to the audience and said, if you want single payer health care, don't elect me. He also said, you know, we're not going to solve climate change because we're too small a state. Well, I'm telling you that I'm going to lead the North American solution for climate change. There should be no excuses with your leaders. You know, we're in a crisis in terms of climate change. And there's no reason why we in Vermont can't lead the solution all across North America.
So, Christine, talk to me about that, because you have fascinating and different proposal for the electric grid, and one that I haven't seen before. So, what's the proposal, and why do you think it affects so many issues?
Well, first of all, you have to kind of, it doesn't take much of a history lesson to know that civilization rise and fall all throughout history based on their energy. And of course, our country, we were founded on slave energy, so we're a lot better shaped today than we were then. So energy is very important, and when we talk about energy, we need as much wind and solar as possible across the country, and we need to be able to move it around. So as the sun moves across the country, we can move the energy to the east after the sun is set, and vice versa. And we have some great wind production in the Midwest. We should move that to the east. We can get some great wind production off the coast, and at the same time, we've got this great resource called Hydro-Quebec, which is a lot of hydro. As long as we're using wind and solar, we can reserve that hydro for when we need it. So we aren't going to solve this alone, but we are. But I am going to lead the solution.
And you talk about how it would fight a lot of social ills if you fix the electric grid. What do you think those social ills are that could be addressed by that?
Well, in Vermont, we export $2 billion a year to the fossil fuel industry. We keep that money in state, we can grow our rural economy. When I talk about our economy, I like to remind people that the working class has not seen any real wage growth since before the early 80s. And even with all the hype about the jobs we've created this year, both our governor talks about this and you hear it at the national level, real wages have not increased for most of America. So when I talk about growing our rural economy, we're going to measure that growth by how it impacts those people that live on the lowest 20% of the income ladder. Because who the hell cares how the economy is doing if it's not benefiting those that need it the most?
So I'm going to stay on the electric grid for one more sec here, because it's just randomly this weekend I haven't talked to an expert on this issue. And so a lot of people might not realize how backwards our electric grid is. So what is the overall issue with the electric grid, and how can you fix it?
Well, we began working on what we call the Internet of Things for the electric grid in 2005. What we really need to do is have reliable connections so that we can communicate with all of our appliances and our electric vehicles, so that when the wind's blowing and the sun's shining, we can charge as much up as we can. There's a lot of energy that's just right in the dead zone of your hot water heater. In the utility that I was running, we were actually put out units out in the field to use that dead zone in the hot water heater for storage. So we need a lot of storage in order to work from renewable energy, and that storage becomes very valuable. So having that Internet of Things connected to your appliance is real important. And also, I envision a future where people have battery storage in their homes. We have battery storage on the grid, and we can pay people to store power for us. So it's a win for the consumer, because when the wind's blowing and the sun's shining today, oftentimes the price is below zero on power. You actually get paid to use your power. So if we can pass those savings right to the consumer, they can basically have a program that says, charge my car when the price is cheap. I just want to make sure it's charged when I get up in the morning, and you've got your vehicle talking to the grid.
Yeah, and on top of that, if fixing the electric grid is also an infrastructure project, that would create a lot of jobs, and then it would have the further consequence of creating more jobs in the wind and solar industry as well. So here we have an intelligent person talking about how to create jobs, fix our economy and our country, versus a guy who's fighting to make sure your wages are as low as possible in Vermont. So when I give you the website, I think that your choice is absolutely clear. For God's sake, it's Vermont, and now it's a really close race. So get in the fight. ChristineForVermont.com. You got the donation, the volunteer links. We'll have those down below if you're watching later on YouTube or Facebook as well. And I think it's a national embarrassment for the state that has Bernie Sanders as their senator to keep putting in a Republican who's going to fight against higher wages as your governor. And Christine, of course, would also be the first ever transgender governor in the history of the country, and that would be historic about a week from now if it happens. So Christine, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for all you do as well.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.